Hey guys, it's Rohan here and hope you are all doing great. So Cameron Winklevoss just raised the stakes and shouted fraud publicly in the very first sentence of his latest letter to Digital Group and his chief Barry Silbert, and calls for removal of Barry Silbert from his current position. And if we have not met before, very welcome to this channel. Here you will find me every day with my analysis on cryptocurrency market. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Alright, this latest open letter comes just a week after Winklevoss wrote another open letter to Silbert accusing him of bad faith stall tactics. And this is the tweet that was tweeted today. Alright, and here is a PDF document that I have downloaded for the whole letter. And some of these claims in this letter is absolutely superbly intense, I must say. And also, honestly, nobody knows the truthfulness of this. So I'm just pretty much reading what he wrote. Alright, so I'm writing to let you know that Gemini and more than 340,000 ARN users have been defrauded by Genesis Global Capital together with its parent company Digital Currency Group, its founder and CEO Barry Silbert, and other key personnel. These parties conspired to make false statements and misrepresentations to Gemini ARN users, other lenders, and the public at large about the solvency and financial health of Genesis. They did so in an effort to mislead lenders into believing that DCG had absorbed massive losses that Genesis incurred from Three Arrows Capital or 3AC collapse, and induce lenders to continue making loans to Genesis by lying. They hoped to buy time to dig themselves out of the hole they created. And here's what happened. Genesis lent 2.36 billion assets to 3AC, a Singapore-based hedge fund that went belly up in June 2022. After collateral was liquidated, Genesis indicated that it was left with a loss of at least 1.2 billion. At this point, Barry Silbert had two legitimate options: restructure the Genesis loan book inside or outside bankruptcy court, or fill the 1.2 billion hole. He did neither. At that point in time, the Genesis loan book was approximately 8 billion, which means that the 1.2 billion loss from 3AC would account for roughly 15% of the loan book's asset. A restructuring then could have addressed this shortfall to achieve a full recovery of assets for all lenders, including ARN users, in a short amount of time and given them direct access to liquidity. But Barry chose not to do this. He also chose not to fill the 1.2 billion hole. Instead, he pretended to. Beginning in early July 2022, Barry, DCG, and Genesis embarked on a carefully crafted campaign of lies to make Gemini ARN users and other lenders believe that DCG had injected 1.2 billion of actual support into Genesis. So public lies. On July 6th, Michael Morrow, then CEO of Genesis, tweeted, DCG has assumed certain liabilities of Genesis related to 3AC to ensure we have the capital to operate and scale our business for long term. This statement was false and misleading. In reality, DCG had not ensured that Genesis had the capital to operate. In fact, DCG had not given Genesis so much as a penny of actual funding to make up for the 3AC losses. Instead, DCG entered into a 10-year promissory note that Genesis at an interest rate of 1% due in 2032. This note was a complete gimmick that did nothing to improve Genesis' immediate liquidity position or make its balance sheet solvent. Then the letter goes on. In fact, DCG had not absorbed the 3AC losses on its balance sheet. Doing so would have required DCG to inject real-time support into Genesis, and the DCG promissory note did not, as I will explain below, leave Genesis with adequate capitalization on its balance sheet to continue business as usual. And then he talks about this accounting fraud. So this lie was perpetuated by a document titled Gemini Risk Metric Request that Bellenswig attached to the same email correspondence with Gemini employees. The financial position per asset section of this document contained what we have since discovered to be at least two critical misrepresentations. The first misrepresentation is it characterized the DCG promissory note as a current asset, within a subcategory labeled other assets. And the second misrepresentation is it valued it at 1.1 billion. Then he says, first, as a matter of generally accepted accounting principles and common understanding, a current asset refers to cash, cash equivalents, or other assets that can be exchanged into cash within 1 year. A promissory note with a principal repayment due in 10 years falls outside the definition of current assets by a country mile. Second, there is no market on earth that would value an unsecured long-dated promissory note at face value. The net present value of this note would be heavily discounted, approximately 70%, to reflect its value as of today, perhaps 300 million. And then he asked, how did we get here? And the answer is greed. As a standalone business, it's inconceivable that Genesis would have lent so much money to 3AC, given the low quality of collateral that 3AC posted. Genesis made these loans because it was one piece of a much larger scheme designed to enrich the greater DCG enterprise. More specifically, Genesis was willing to recklessly lend to 3AC because 3AC was using the money for the kamikaze grayscale net asset value trade, which is a recursive trade that ballooned the assets under management of Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and as a consequence, the fees earned by its sponsor, Grayscale Investment LLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of DCG. And by this net asset value trade, which is a recursive trade, and then he refers to his details in a footnote. Let's read that. So this is how this trade actually happened as per this letter. So this is how it worked in its original form. 3AC borrowed from Genesis to create shares in the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, shares that were trading at a premium to net asset value of the trust. 3AC then turned around and posted these same GBTC shares with Genesis as collateral to borrow more to rinse and repeat. When the 12-month, later on 6-month lockup expired for a given tranche of GBTC shares, 3AC was able to sell them and collect the premium. This worked until it did not. In early 2021, GBTC shares started trading at a discount to NAV, a discount that has persisted and widened ever since. This not only killed the NAV trade, but also meant that the GBTC collateral posted by 3AC at Genesis was degrading, further exacerbating the collateralization of the 3AC loans. Okay, that was a footnote. Now going back to the letter, So Genesis booked these interactions with 3AC as bona fide collateralized loans. It is becoming clear, however, that this was not the case at all. It literally 3AC was acting as a mere conduit for Genesis, allowing it to enter into what were effectively swap transactions of Bitcoin for GBTC shares with the Grayscale Trust. In this transaction, Genesis was betting that shares would be worth more than the Bitcoin in the future. The 3AC loan was a Bitcoin leg of the swap, and the 3AC collateral was the GBTC leg of the swap. 3AC was a mule shuttling the assets between the parties, and as a result, Genesis ended up owning massive risk. Up until 2021, Genesis owned this zero-sum trade because the GBTC shares were worth more than Bitcoin. But starting in 2021, however, Genesis lost this trade because the shares were worth less than the Bitcoin. Disturbingly, not only did Genesis not close out 3AC's position when the NAV trade inverted, something any rational independently operated business would have done, it continued to lend to 3AC on attractive terms and accept GBTC as collateral. For Grayscale, this had the desired effect of keeping GBTC shares from being sold into the market, which would have depressed the share price and further widened the discount to NAV. But for Genesis, this had the undesired effect of keeping its risk position open and allowing it to grow. Why would Genesis enter into a toxic risk position where the best it could do was not lose money? Things only began to make sense when you realize that the Bitcoin this swap was stuffing into the Grayscale Trust like a Thanksgiving turkey is stuck there forever. It can never be redeemed, or at least until Grayscale in its sole discretion decides to implement a redemption program allowing GBTC shares to be converted back into Bitcoin. As a result, Barry was comfortable with Genesis loading up more and more on this toxic trade because it was a gambit. And then he moves on. Original accounting fraud. Instead of booking these swaps as a risky derivatives that they were, Genesis hid them by mischaracterizing the first and last legs of these swaps transactions as collateralized loans on its balance sheet. This made Genesis' balance sheet appear healthier than it actually was, fraudulently inducing lenders to continue making loans. And the path forward. Here he pretty much concludes his open letter. So he says, for all the reasons mentioned above, there is no path forward as long as Barry Silbert remains CEO of DCG. He has proven himself unfit to run DCG and unwilling and unable to find a resolution with creditors that is both fair and reasonable. As a result, Gemini, acting on behalf of 340,000 ARN users, request that the board remove Barry Silbert as CEO effective immediately and install a new CEO who will right the wrongs that occurred under Barry's watch. Genesis lenders, including ARN users, have been seriously harmed and deserves a resolution for the recovery of their assets. I'm confident that with the new management at DCG, we can all work together to achieve a positive out-of-court solution that will provide a win-win outcome for all, including DCG shareholders. Alright, so that was a super intense letter, but again, nobody knows the truth behind yet. So in this article written in Cointelegraph, I just want to mention this statement. So in a statement to Cointelegraph, a DCG spokesperson called the letter a disparate and unconstructive publicity stunt, claiming Winklevoss and Gemini were solely responsible for operating Gemini ARN and marketing the program to its customers. The firm suggested it could pursue legal action if necessary. And also this Reuters article puts some light, that is some information from the Genesis side, and it says, a Genesis spokesperson said in a statement that the company was disappointed that Gemini was waging a public media campaign despite ongoing productive private dialogue between the parties. We remain focused on finding a solution for our borrowing and lending intermediation business and reaching the best outcome for all affected Genesis lending and Gemini ARN clients, said the spokesperson for Genesis. That pretty much wraps up this video. If you liked it, do smash the like button and also don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.